You're listening to the Popcorn Conspiracy on CentralCoastRadio.com. I'm your host, Kyle, and I'd like to talk a little bit about a recent documentary that I caught. It's titled Shackleton, The Greatest Story of Survival, The IMAX Experience. It's called this because there's actually two different versions of this documentary. There's a shorter version that's playing in IMAX, and there's a longer feature length version playing in regular cinemas. In some ways, the shorter version is more spectacular, obviously taking much more taking advantage of IMAX's huge cinema screen. The documentary is about Sir Ernest Shackleton and the crew of the Endurance and their 1914 expedition to cross Antarctica. their their expedition went completely awry, and it turned into a rescue mission that went over the course of several years. Um, the documentary itself is hosted by an adventurer of his own renown, Tim Jarvis. He himself actually recreated a large portion of Shackleton's expedition in 2013 using uh, the same, more or less the same equipment that Shackleton and his men had access to at the time. It's important to note that these men managed to survive against the elements, doing things that they really didn't think that they'd have to do, mountaineering and uh, going across 1,000 kilometers of ocean in a life raft, all these kind of things, and the documentary goes through pretty much the entire story. It's really exciting, actually, to hear this tale, because it's something I'd never actually heard of before. Um, the documentary goes over the original planned expedition, the hardships of a ship breaking through the ice, that ice then betraying them and trapping the Endurance and actually crushing this ship to smithereens. What's amazing about this at this point, that there is actually video record of this happening. This expedition actually not didn't just have photos, but there was video taken 100 years ago of this expedition, and I don't. There's something awe-inspiring about seeing these men trapped on the ice, not knowing what's going to happen to them, and seeing their ship being smashed to smithereens by the compacting ice. From this point, the man then had to get to a nearby island, which itself was uninhabited, but uninhabitable too. So, and from that point, a small group of men led by Shackleton himself had to cross extremely dangerous seas and then go mountaineering across South Georgia to seek out rescue from a nearby whaling outpost. Um, the documentary is quite interesting because of its recreation of the expedition through not just Tim Jarvis's narration, but also through uh, Shackleton's captain's logs himself. Uh, his logs are narrated by a voice actor named Rupert Degas, and they're really interesting to really put you in the mindset of what these men are going through. Not only was is there footage of the original Shackleton expedition, but there seems to be footage of Jarvis's expedition as well, and you can really get a feel for just how much respect Jarvis has for Shackleton, what he managed to achieve. The incredible part of the story is that Shackleton managed to get rescue, and all 28 of his men survived. There's an interesting look at climate change in the documentary as well. There's part of the mountaineering that the Shackleton's men had to do 100 years ago included crossing massive glaciers that, as Jarvis points out, are simply not there anymore. There's one point that Shackleton and his men actually had to turn back because the glaciers were just so unpassable. They pretty much just had to trek back for God knows how far in order to actually in order to reach the whaling company. But now Jarvis and his expedition, they, if they wanted to, they could just walk across the actual seabed. That's just how much a difference 100 years of climate change can make. Um, it really is an incredible story of survival, and it's hard to give a movie like this a score out of five. I find that IMAX documentaries are either really bad, or they're good, or they're really good. And so this one is definitely a really good IMAX documentary. If I was going to give this a score, I would probably give it a 5 out of 5. I think it's a great story. It's really and just amazing what these people managed to do, and yeah, the fact that it has a really positive message in it about not giving up and to fight and to keep on going and to push through. Um, yeah, so I highly recommend this documentary. I am kind of interested to check out the extended version of the doco as well. I would like to see just what exactly has been cut from one version to the next. But as for a movie to see in IMAX, this is something really impressive. It's a really amazing film, and I highly recommend. With that, I'll say you're just listening to the Popcorn Conspiracy on CentralCoastRadio.com, and we'll be back right after this.